Good afternoon, church. No, good morning. Good morning. God is good all the time. God is good. God is good. I love photographs. Before I met my wife, I wasn't really one for photographs. But one thing I've learned from my wife is the pure joy, the blessing you get from when you look at photographs from past times and reminds you of, what you have, where you've been, what challenges you've been through, how the Lord has blessed you. And this morning, I want us to look at a picture that's right at the start of the story from Eden to eternity, and how that almost was an indication of what was to come. If you're taking notes, the title of what we're going to discuss today is On a Hill Far Away. And it's based on a song that we know so well. I know Pastor David was saying about a song that, I think on Friday, he said, if God calls him home first, and we are celebrating him, a song that he wants to be sung. This is one of the ones, I don't know if I've told my wife this just yet, but if I go before you, make sure they play this. On a hill far away stood an old rugged cross, the emblem of suffering and shame. And I love that old rugged cross where the dearest and best for a world of lost sinners was slain. So I'll cherish the old rugged cross till my trophies at last I lay down. I will cling to the old rugged cross and exchange it one day for a crown on a hill far away. And our main text today is based on Genesis chapter 22, a story that we know so well. And it's one of these stories in the Bible that I think at times we hear these stories, we read them, people preach about them, but we don't fully get the message that it's sending. We focus on what is being preached at the time, that our minds can't comprehend that there could be another angle to it. It's a story of Abraham being asked to sacrifice Isaac. And I believe this is a story that sums up probably one of the most wonderful experiences of resolute faith in God. Hebrews chapter 11 from verse 17 to 19. I haven't sent this to you, Peter, yet, so I'll get it in mind. Hebrews chapter 11, 17 to 19. It says this. Hebrews 11, 17 to 19. By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, and he who had received the promises was in the act of offering up his only son, of whom it was said, through Isaac shall your offspring be named. For it was by faith that Abraham, when tested. And before we go on, I want to, a story that I came across. In America, there was a department store, and they had these dolls made of Jesus in a manger, had all the hay, the animals, it's just almost like a miniature thing. But it was not selling. It was not selling at all. So one of the chief execs of that convenience store thought he was going to try and, make things work a little to try and get sales up. So this is what he came up with. The slogan on the wall said, Jesus Christ, price marked down 50%. Get him while you can. Jesus Christ is half price. Get him while you can. And I was thinking to myself, there's so many mistakes with the whole idea of bottling Jesus, in the door, and it's not selling, so we're going to do a sale half price. Number one, this idea that we can confine Jesus as a baby. That's why at times, those who are not saved, when it comes to Christmas, after Christmas is finished, their minds can't comprehend that there's actually something more to this Jesus, because in their minds, he's just a baby. Secondly, that Jesus is a commodity that you can just, decide, okay, today he's half price. He's going to go back up to 75%. We cannot do that. He's worth far more to his Father. In fact, Jesus is so irreplaceable. It pained him to give him up for you and I. And finally, this idea that we can just buy Jesus. He came to buy you and me. He came to buy you and me. So with these thoughts in mind, I want us to get into Genesis chapter 22. And I want us to look at 4 phases in this story. Preparation, examination or test, submission, and anticipation. Preparation, examination, submission, anticipation. So let's read from verse 1 of chapter 22 of Genesis. After these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham, and he said, here am I. Isn't it incredible when we read back 21 chapters before, we hear God calling out to man. And this time, what does man do? Man hides. Adam, when God called him, he was hiding. Fast forward, God called Abraham. Without hesitation, what does he say? Here I am. That's for another sermon. He said, take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you. So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him, and his son Isaac. And he cut the wood for the burnt offering and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. On the third day, let's bear that in our minds. On the third day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place from afar. Then Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey. I and the boy will go over there and worship and come back again to you. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and said, Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son. And he took in his hand and the fire and the knife. So they went, both of them, together. And Isaac said to his father Abraham, my father. And he said, here am I, my son. He said, behold the fire and the wood, but where is a lamb for a burnt offering? Abraham said, God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering, my son. So they went up, both of them, together. When they came to the place of which God had told them, Abraham built the altar there and laid the wood in order and bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out his hand and took out the knife to slaughter his son. But, do you not love a but in the Bible? But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said again, here am I. He said, do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, seeing that you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him was a ram caught in a thicket. Preparation, examination, submission, anticipation. Well, what was God preparing Abraham for? What were these things? All these things that happened in chapter 1, chapter 21, are the things that God was preparing him for. If you have time, you read it, you'll see. But briefly, one of the things that happened in chapter 21 was Abraham had a situation with Abimelech, the king. Remember the story where Abraham lied that Sarah was his sister because he was afraid of the king? That happened in chapter 21, God preparing him. In the same chapter, Abraham's first son. Remember, when God spoke to Abraham, he said, take your only son. Did you remember that when we read? He said, take your only son. But that's not true. Abraham had another son, Ishmael, whom he conspired with Sarah so that he would sleep with Hagar. But the Lord said, your only son. We'll come back to that. So his first son, Ishmael, had fled. He'd left. God was preparing him. In chapter 2 of verse 21, it says, and Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age at the time of which God had spoken to him. Isaac was born in chapter 21. So all these things were happening in chapter 21. That was what God was preparing Abraham for in chapter 22. There was a restful period for Abraham, a period of rest. You see, before God brings something our way, he prepares us. We might not see it. We might not know that he is preparing us. But in chapter 21, we see how God was preparing Abraham for what was to come. There's a Yiddish proverb that says, God sends burdens, but also sends shoulders for us to bear them. You see, God needed Abraham. God needed to know that Abraham was going to be prepared for what was coming. And just like Abraham, God is preparing you and I for what is coming tomorrow. And not just for what is coming, but the great reward that is going to come with that. It reminds me of the story of a small tree that was in the shadow of a very, very big oak tree. The leaves, the branches of this big oak tree covered this little tree that was not growing at all. But in this tree's mind, the big oak was shielding it from the sun. When it rained, it protected it. The wind, it wouldn't sway from side to side. It was reveling in the protection, in the love, and that safety that it was enjoying from the oak tree. But one day, a woodsman thought, this oak tree is too big. It's actually getting in the way. So he decided to cut the tree down. And he starts cutting it. And as the axe hit the trunk of this big oak tree, the little tree cried out, "Oh no, there goes my safety. There goes my assurance. There goes my protection." And the woodsman cried out back and said, "Oh no, it is not so. Now you get to see more of the sun for your own self. You're not getting it secondhand. Now you got to get the rain for yourself directly. Now the wind can blow off all the old leaves that need to grow off so that the new ones can grow." You see, church, and the first point that I want to share with us this morning regarding the story, sometimes the blastings of God lead to blessings. I'll say it again. Sometimes the blastings of God, the chastisement of God, actually leads to blessings. We need to have faith. We need to trust in that tree on that hill so far away. Sometimes God will have to subtract in order to multiply. Sometimes he has to take out the chaff before the wheat becomes so pure. Before we got married, we were having our marriage counseling with the pastor that married us. And he said to us, relationships, marriages are like a cake. The ingredients are being put together one by one, one by one. Once all the ingredients are together, some of those ingredients need to be burnt away so that sweet, smelling, good-looking cake that we get at the end can be enjoyed. Sometimes God needs to subtract in order to multiply. God prepared Abraham. There's a stage of preparation that comes before the test. And you see, we must be very mindful of this thing. God tested Abraham. It was a test. And I think at times we get this misconception that God doesn't test us, but he tempts us. But that's the wrong way of thinking. In fact, Satan is the one who tempts. And Satan tempts us to bring out the worst in us. When you undergo challenges of temptation, the devil is not tempting you. In fact, first of all, it is not God who's tempting you. It is not God who's... In fact, before I expand on that, let's read James. James chapter 1, verse 13. It says this: "Let no one say when he is tempted, I am being tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted with evil." And here it is. "And he himself tempts no one." So you know those moments that you feel like you're under a challenge, you're being tempted. It is not God. "God, why are you tempting me?" No, it is not God. It is the devil who tempts to bring out the worst in us. But God tests to bring out the best in us. That faith that we declare that we have in God, he tests us to see the authenticity of that faith. Well, what happens if I don't know the difference between a temptation and a test then? Trust in God's sovereignty, just like Abraham did. If you don't know whether you're being tempted or you're being tested, trust in God's sovereignty. Joseph, for example, Joseph was tempted. First and foremost, his own family sold him. He could have said, "God, why are you tempting me like this?" But no, he trusted in God's sovereignty. He was sold into slavery. He's in Potiphar's house. He's serving faithfully. And then the experience with Potiphar's wife happens. He could have cried and said, "God, why are you tempting me?" He didn't. He held on because he trusted the sovereignty of God. God will test us from time to time so that he can see how deeply rooted our faith in him is. So never mistaken God's test for a temptation. Because once you do that, you miss the blessing that is to come at the end of that temptation, of that test, I beg your pardon. And I believe sometimes those of us who got married and we said those vows, I believe sometimes when we're saying those vows, all we hear are for the better, we hear for the richer, we hear for the poorer. We don't hear the in sickness. We don't hear the in health. We don't hear that when she annoys you so much that you just want to. We don't hear that. When the temptation comes, when the troubles come, we then think this is God doing it. Satan tempts us to bring out the worst in us. But the Lord tests us to bring out the best in us. And to bring out the best in Abraham, God tested the most sensitive part of Abraham. See, Abraham, before he got the name Abraham, his name was Abram. And Abram means exalted father. But Abraham didn't have any children. But his name meant exalted father. God then decides to change his name to Abraham. And wait for it. Abraham means father of a multitude. So you meet Abraham down the street. Oh, Abraham, what's your name? My name is Abraham. Oh, what does that mean? Father of the multitudes. How many children do you have? I don't have any. Eventually, the Lord provides the miracle of Isaac. But now the Lord wanted to test Abraham and see, Abraham, do you love me more? Or do you love your son more? Do you love the giver of the miracle more? Or do you love the miracle more than the giver? A chap called J.C. Riley wrote this: a religion which costs nothing is worth nothing. A following, something that costs nothing, is worth nothing. The Lord tested Abraham, the most sensitive part, because he wanted to see, Abraham, how deeply rooted is your faith. Remember the phrase, the Lord will test you to bring out the best in you. After the test, so Abraham is beginning the test now. Well, what happens after the test or during the test? Let's go to verse 3 and see what we're told. So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him and his son Isaac. And he cut the wood for the burnt offering and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. Look how the verse starts. So Abraham got up. Something that you've been yearning for. You've been crying out to the Lord for so many years. You've seen others getting theirs. You haven't got yours. Finally, the Lord gives it to you. And then the Lord then says to you, you know what? Take that miracle and go and give it away. And the Bible just tells us, so Abraham just got up. So nonchalantly. His response seems immediate. It seems swift. He didn't think about it. He didn't think twice. But can you imagine what he was thinking? Lord, this miracle that you promised me, I've waited for it for so long. And now you're asking me to do this? My only son, what am I going to say to Sarah when I come back? She carried this child for 9 months. How old was she? 90, wasn't she? And then I'll come back and say to her, you know, in your old age, that son that you carried for 9 months, you know what I did? God said, just go and kill him. So I did it. What would have been going through his mind? But we're told, so he did it. And here's one of the things that I love about this story in verse 5. Then Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey. I will come back. Is that what he said? He said, we will go over there and worship and come again to you. Despite this, Abraham was now in the position of submission. He turned his test into worship. He made a statement of faith. He made a reasoned calculation based on who God is to him. Now you see, he could have either thought, God, you're a fickle God, because you promised me this miracle in my old age, something that is impossible, you gave it to me. And then now, you're telling me I should go and do this. Well, God, you're fickle and you can't be trusted. That's one thing Abraham could have been thinking. But then on the other hand, he could have been thinking like this. Well, God, you are faithful. You have proven yourself time and time again. You said, in my old age, I will be a father. You said, in our old age, my wife of 90 years old will do something that no woman has ever done before. So on that basis, you're faithful and you can be trusted. Other version says, Abraham concluded. He made a conclusion. And in Hebrew, conclusion or concluding means logizomai, and it means logical thought. Compute, calculate, reason, logically think through. So as he's going up the hill with Isaac, he's thinking in his head, he's logizomizing, right? Lord, you promised me a son. That was impossible, but here he is. So you are faithful. I can trust you. So Isaac was going to be offered up as a sacrifice based on Abraham's submission. The Lord said to you that he's going to bring you to a new place. He's going to bring you to a new nation. He's going to bless you. He's going to expand your territory. Oh, apologies. And then things start happening. You can't get a job. You do get a job, your work colleagues are being horrible to you. The Lord has promised you that he's going to set your feet on solid ground. Things are happening. What do you do? What do you do? Hold on to that word. I said last week, Mandy, your name is Mandy here, or she's not here, she was here. I wish she was here. But Mandy's name means worthy of love. And I said to her, Mandy, this is what God says about you. So it doesn't matter what man does. Hold on to that promise, just like Abraham did. Abraham computed. He thought logically, and he said, look, you know what? Yeah, I could easily think God is fickle, and he can't be trusted, because why will he give me this blessing? Why will he give me this blessing and now tell me to do this? He's a fickle God, I can't trust him. But he reasoned and he thought, God, I remember when I had a name that meant father of many nations, but I didn't have a son. And then you said to me, I'm going to give you a son in your old age. You did it. So because of that, I can stand on that word. And because you did it, I know you'll do it again. You're going to give me another miracle because he promised. Those of you who know my wife and I, our story surrounding the children. Long before I met my wife, she had an encounter with God, and she was convinced in her heart that she was going to have twins. Not just twins, a boy and a girl. She can tell you the story herself. God had promised her, this is what I'm going to do to you. And then she meets this handsome young man who she couldn't keep her eyes off. And then the time comes. Who is this handsome young man, Peter is saying? And then the time comes and she's pregnant. And the first thing this man asks her is, are you still going to love the child if it's only one? This happened. You can ask my wife. And in that moment, she was resolute because she said, look, my God said he's going to do this. It doesn't matter what explanation you have for asking that question. He is going to do this. Today, you see those two here in this church. She held on to that promise. She held on to it, irrespective of what was happening. She would say to people at work, I want this. And they'll say to her, no, children are not like mail order. You can't just decide, yeah, I want this, I want that, and it happens. She had to stand on the promises of God. And I want to speak to somebody in church this morning. God has given you a word. But everything else that's happening does not seem as though it is actually going to happen. Don't let anybody else start messing with your thoughts. Don't. Stand on that word because God is going to make it happen. If that promise from God is illogical, church, get theological. If the promise is illogical, get theological. What do I mean by that? Go to his word. What does he say about you? What has he said to you? To this day, that message that my wife wrote in her Bible is still in her Bible. It's still there. And I'm sure during those times, she would have been going back to that word. God, you said this. I wrote it down. This is what you said. Peter, hold on to the promise that the Lord has said he's going to do for you. It doesn't matter how long it's taken. It doesn't matter what's happened before that. Hold on to it. If the promise is illogical, get theological, church. Start reasoning based on who God is to you. You know how far he's brought you. Abraham knew what God had done for him. So there was no way he wasn't going to trust that God was going to pull him through this. And that's why he said in verse 5, we are going to go up and we are going to come back down. Because he knew the Lord was going to do it again. He turned his test into a place of praise and worship. He said, I and the boy are going to go up and worship and come back. Church, turn your worst times into worship times. That's what Abraham did. Become so preoccupied with God. Gaze at God and merely glance at your tests and your troubles. I'll say that again. Gaze at God and just offer a mere glance at your challenges. Because once your gaze is on him, who has promised and will deliver, this is irrelevant. Timothy, will you help me on the keys as we finish, please? Finally, anticipation. Preparation, examination or test, submission. Abraham submitted to God's command. And now comes the anticipation. Verse 11 to 14. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, here am I. He said, do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God. See, the anticipation here is the similarities between the story of Isaac and Jesus. It's very, very striking between the two of them. Isaac was a miracle baby, born to a 100-odd-year-old man and a 90-year-old lady. It was a miracle. Jesus was born to a Virgin Mary. Two miracles. Isaac had been long promised. When God promised Abraham he had a son, so many years. Jesus had been long promised, long in the Old Testament. The prophets prophesied his coming. Isaac was named before birth. The angel of the Lord said to Abraham, you shall name him Isaac, meaning laughter. When the angel Gabriel came to Mary, he said to her, you shall name him Jesus. Verse 4 tells us, on the third day, Abraham lifted up his eyes and saw the place from afar. In Abraham's mind, we're told that it took 3 days to get to where they were going. In Abraham's mind, as they're going up this hill, he's probably thinking, my son is dead. My son is dead. Now, I trust that God is going to do a miracle, but he's thinking, my son is dead. My son is dead. Jesus died. And after how many days? 3 days. He rose again. The anticipation was there. In verse 6, we're told this. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and said, and laid it on Isaac his son. And he took in his hand the fire and the knife. So they went both of them together. Like Isaac, Jesus faced sacrificial death at the hands of his own father. Like Isaac, Jesus also carried his wood up to the mount. And do you know the mountain where Abraham was to offer the sacrifice was Mount Moriah? Mount Moriah is in very close proximity to a very well-known place, other words known as Calvary, where several years later on, another son would carry his own wood for a sacrifice. But that's where the similarity ends. Unlike Isaac, the father went through with his sacrifice. Jesus died. There was no ram in the thicket. There was no substitute for Jesus. He had to go through with it. See, with Isaac, his father only contemplated the idea of sacrificing his son. He lifted the knife, and that's as far as he got. Whereas with Jesus, his father went through with it. And in finishing, church, two things to behold. I believe when Abraham lifted that knife and he was about to sacrifice his own son, I believe all of heaven will have just marveled and thought, here is a man who truly loves the Lord. Can that be said about you and me? And conversely, when Jesus died on that cross, I believe the whole of heaven would have marveled and asked themselves, wow, does God love mankind so much? Preparation, examination, the test comes. Through the tests, the strength of our faith leads to that anticipation of what's to come. And I close with this. There was a little girl who decided that she was going to leave a Valentine's Day card for her dad. It wasn't Valentine's Day, but she decided she was going to leave her dad a card on his dresser in his bedroom. So she got her paper together, her art and craft stuff, and she drew a heart and she stuck glitter, and then she went through a great deal to make this perfect for her dad. And then she set it ever so neatly on his dresser, waiting with anticipation as to the father's response. The following day, she went back, probably moving about too much, I'll stand here. She went back to her dad's room to see if dad had replied, only to see her beautifully crafted card that took a lot of time, crumpled, and put in the bin. This little girl thought, oh, this cannot be. This is not my dad. This cannot be. So what does she do? She picks up the crumpled paper, unravels it, tries to straighten it out as much as she could to restore it to its original glory. And what does she do? She sets it on the dresser again. This time, even with more anticipation as to what her dad is going to say about the response. A day goes by, nothing. A couple of days, nothing. She musters up the courage to go to the room, and she gets there. And the same thing again. The beautifully crafted card that she'd worked so hard at trying to straighten out again had been crumpled and put in the bin. So she musters up courage and goes up to her dad. Daddy, I did this for you. I did this for you. Why do you keep putting it in the bin? And out of anger and annoyance, the dad says, you need to stop it. I know that you love me already. You don't need to do this. What a disappointing response to such an act of selfless love. And that's what the Lord experiences from us at times. He gave up a son, an only son that he had. Just like this little girl's Valentine's card. We just pick it up, and pick up God's love, his sacrifice, and we say, Lord, yeah, we know you love us. You don't need to keep reminding us of it. On a hill, far away, stood an old rugged cross. All we need to do is lift up our eyes to that cross. Gaze at the cross. Glance at our troubles. Because his love is more than enough. I pray that his word will manifest in our lives, and we shall stand resolute in spite of whatever we're going through. The Lord bless you.